Christmas card today from Maggie the cat. It's got a beautiful picture of Kyle and Sophie in it. And Sophie's got one of them little suck tubes in her mouth, but she's still beautiful even with that suck tube.
You want?
Mike, you're a good boy. Love you. Love your family. You've been a great grandson. Okay, now we'll get into the book.
Do you want to show the picture?
Yeah, here's the picture of the two great-grandchildren. Now we'll get into the book. And JFK, tell your brother Keith he can listen to the book too. And Sammy, you tell your brother and sister they can listen to the book too. And Robbie, may all your kids listen to this. And all the grandkids and great-grandkids and all the kids, everybody. After much thought and discussion, the pampered newcomer was christened Exodus, because like the Israelites, he had journeyed out of one place into another. Once again, the stables were filled with tumult and commotion, and those passing the entrance to Eden Way often paused to listen to the booming guffaws of heavy voices, the joyous laughter of a child, or scratched puzzled heads with thoughtful wingtips, and another sound which never before had been heard in the celestial city, the shrill, cracked, voice-changing barking of Exodus. As the planets revolved around a yellow sun, so does Michael's day evolve around a yellow dog. In the morning there was the romp all over the stables and up and down Eden Way. In the afternoon there were trips with Exodus safely concealed under his robe, out to such far places as Valhalla, where cataracts of rainbows fell from towering cliffs to shatter on the rocks below and send their fragments streaming down to earth, or out to incredibly new, beautiful Jerusalem, to which everyone in the celestial city had contributed a tree, a flower, a brook, or a winding lane from his dearest memory of childhood. In the evening there was a snuggling in the straw at the stables with Exodus' heart thudding hard against his, and coming sweetly to the ear the singing of Shard and the other drivers. This ideal routine might have gone on forever if it hadn't been for the singing practice. Everyone had some part, large or small, and Michael, as a member of the cherub choir, was called for rehearsal. He was on time for the first rehearsal by only the thickness of the slight tarnish on his halo, because it had taken him so long to say goodbye to Exodus, to admonish the drivers not to let him out of the stable, and to give full instructions on what to do in case of any emergency, such as a strain in his bark or a sprain in his tail. The cherub choir practice was not much of a success that day. In every song, Michael's voice was decidedly off-key, and Michael's mind was definitely on dog. Their reunion that evening was jubilant. Shard, Shell, and Crag, who had proved themselves to be consummate dog watchers, swaggered modestly under Michael's praise, while Exodus employed a pink tongue to wash each freckle, erasing every foreign odor it had gathered during the day, so that Michael again would smell like the stables. The next morning, reassured by the outcome of the day before, Michael dashed out of Angel's Aid, darted down Eden Way to say goodbye to Exodus, and the rest raced off to singing practice, arriving with a full split second to spare. Of all cherub faces, his was the shiniest. Of all cherub voices, his was the lustiest. Of all cherub scents, his was the doggiest. The person or object responsible for the first link in a chain of unhappy events, which later led to a catastrophe, has never been irrefutably ascertained. Shell put the blame on a defective latch. Crag put the blame on a defective staple. Shard put the blame on both their defective heads. Whatever failed, or whoever was at fault, the gate of the stable stood 3 inches ajar, and Exodus wiggled out. Reading Michael's footsteps up Eden Way was an easy task for Exodus's young primary grade nose. But when he arrived at the Plaza of Eternity, where every day thousands upon thousands passed, he lost the trail. He hopefully examined the steps of the Library of the Archangels. He anxiously sniffed the doorstep of the High Court of the Patriarch Prophets. He frantically inspected every inch of the curb in front of the house of the guardian and trustful angels. His fear turned into dread and his dread into terror as he minutely nosed the entrance of the Museum Antiquity and found no trace of Michael's feet. At this moment, a passerby noticed him and bent down to pat him. And Exodus' legs trembling, and suddenly remembering unkind hands of earlier days, shied away and gave a shrill bark of alarm. This sound never heard before in the Plaza of Eternity caused every head to turn. And then, because the people who lived in Celestial City were much like the people who lived in any city, everyone hurried across the plaza to assume the role of curious bystander. Exodus, finding himself surrounded by this host of strangers, cowered and whimpered. Then, with courage born of panic, he snarled a vicious string of mongrel growls, threw himself at the forest of legs, slithered through to freedom, and went bolding down the avenue of creation. It was blind, unreasoning flight. The voices behind him and those along his way, which called to him, only added to his fear, and he went faster and faster until he was a yellow comet with a yellow tail flying through the Celestial City. He made a shambles of Hallow Smith Road. Should have read that Halo Smith Road. Scattering the workers like chaff, toppling the towering piles of golden circlets which went rolling and bouncing off into infinity. Centuries hence they would confound the earthlings, who with bated breath would tell their awestruck tales of saucers flying past. He left chaos behind him in the bazaars of Robe-Maker's Lane. Just before his arrival, a whisper as fast and as darting as a hummingbird had sped down the street. A hound of Hades, breathing fire and brimstone, was loose in the Celestial City. Upon the appearance of this satanic emissary, every seamstress swooned or had hysterics, and league upon league of finest weaving of every rainbow hue went streaming off into space. 1,000 years from then, when it had been woven into tapestries by the four winds, the groundlings would ask their men of science to explain the seasoned sunset of unearthly beauty. Exodus was outmaneuvered and brought to bay in the street of the Waymakers by a company of avenging angels, the most feared and implacable soldiers of all time. In an instant, they could destroy a city. In a week, they could starve a nation with hordes of locusts or other insects. In a month, they could decimate a continent with a plague. In 40 days and 40 nights, they could drown a planet. Strange to say, these dread avengers were very gentle with Exodus. The ferocious sergeant surprised the onlookers by talking puppy talk, and the merciless captain, looking neither right nor left, strode off to the High Court of the Patriarch Prophets with Exodus cradled in his arms. It was the unanimous decision of the Patriarch Prophets that Exodus was to be banished from the celestial city at the first hour of the following day, which was the hour of correlation when every planet, star, sun, and meteor was checked for path and position against the proprietor's master plan of creation. Until that time, he was to be confined in the old gatehouse, an abandoned relic of the early days when there had been few rivals. The Patriarch Prophets, serene in their belief that the matter of the yellow dog was settled, went on to more important business. But being mere prophets and not the proprietor, they could not be all-knowing. The next morning at the hour of correlation, the planets, suns, stars, and comets were all in their proper places. But there was no Exodus in the old gatehouse. And there was a redhead cherub missing at Angel's Aid. The celestial city was searched street by street, avenue by avenue. Each distant borough was thoroughly combed, and every possibly hiding place, even though it was as small as a needle's eye, was looked into. But not a red or yellow hair could be found. The elderly grandmother at Angel's Age, all of a flutter because never before had they lost a cherub, made their heart-stricken, incoherent report to the only son of the proprietor of the celestial city. The son listened and smiled and nodded his head, then like all the others, because he had always been very knowing about children. He searched nowhere in the celestial city for Michael the yellow dog. When he left Angel's Aid, he turned and made his way across the plaza of eternity, passed through the great gates, and walked slowly down the stairs. On the bottommost step, scarcely visible in the cold, whirling mist and empty darkness of endless space, he saw a red blob and a yellow blob, which appeared to be tightly fused together. I'll show you what they look like, tightly fused together. They were very, very happy with each other. Oh, the proprietor's son sat down on the steps and said, "Would you mind if I petted your dog? I've been standing here admiring him. And do you know that in all my travels, I don't ever believe I've seen such a handsome animal. They don't like him, and they don't think he's at all handsome." The cherub's words were so hushed and tear-stroked that no one but the only son of the proprietor could have stood and understood them. "They're going to send him away." "Oh, that's a great mistake," said the son. "I won't stay if he has to go." "I don't blame you for feeling that way, because I can see that you and this dog are the best of friends." The son gently stroked the rough yellow hair. "I once had one that was very much like him. Oh, not nearly so fine, of course, but I thought he was beautiful. We met quite by accident. He was a stray that had sought shelter under the same roof where I was born. And when we left that place and went into Egypt, he followed right along at our little donkey's heels." "What was his name?" "I called him Caleb. Oh, he was very smart. And when I was a boy in Nazareth, he went everywhere with me and guarded my bed every night." The son smiled at the memory of long ago. "Now you must tell me how you come by your friend." The son listened to Michael's story, gravely nodding his head from time to time. Then when it was finished, he rose and held out his hand. "Come, Michael," he said. "Let us go back into the city." "But if I go back, they'll take Exodus away from me," cried the cherub. "Oh, no," said the son. "Has it not been promised by the proprietor that all men shall find what they love and cherish in his celestial city? And how very blind we have been never to have seen that men would give such a great share of their love to all the small creatures that live with them in their days on earth. Ah, what an empty, lonely place our celestial city must be for those who believe that the familiar and never-forgotten voice of a furred or feathered friend is more sweet and more harmonious than the sound of all our angel choirs. Come, come, Michael. We must do something about it, you and I." Carrying the cherub in his arms and with the small yellow dog following closely at his heels, the son of the proprietor walked up the broad, foot-worn stairs and passed through the great gates. At all hours in the busy days that followed, the used chariots. I must have skipped a page. No, I didn't. What was his name? Passed through the great gates. Okay. Massive wheels rolling, thunder and the flying hoofs of the fearsome steeds striking lightning as they did the bidding of the proprietor and his only son. The frightened earthlings ran to their houses and covered their heads as the sky was sliced into fiery ribbons and trampled into ominous clouds of black dust. And they trembled as the ground beneath their feet quavered and shook and groaned under the mighty laboring of all the heavenly host. When the task was finished, when the last great timber and smallest peg had been found and carried to the celestial city, There arose on the street of miracles, in the shadow of the majestic hall of the recording angels, and the imposing high court of the patriarch prophets, the shabby down at the roof, crooked at the beams building, which stand there today with its many additions. The old walls are impregnated with the smell and warmth of many animals, for here is safely sheltered every small creature that anyone has ever loved and lost. No owner need ever worry about their care or comfort, for in this wondrous place are a man and a woman who are summoned by the proprietor from their retirement at Elysian fields, and who joyfully resumed the work they knew so well. Whenever the door at number 10 opens and a new visitor appears, there is instantly an excited chorus of barks, meows, chirps, squeaks, and chattering. Suddenly, from somewhere, perhaps the farthest corner, there comes a sharp, ecstatic, and almost hysterical cry, which rises high above all the others. The ear and the heart know that the long lost is lost no longer. Number 10 is very easy to find. In the plaza of eternity will be found a red-haired cherub and a yellow dog. Following the road with the pockets in the back and wagging tail with a crook in it, the newcomer will arrive in no time at all at the famous ark of Captain and Mrs. Noah, on number 10 on the Street of Miracles. And that's the end of this story. Wasn't that a wonderful story? It was all about the littlest angel of all and his little dog. And today is a wonderful day. It's 2 days before Christmas. And tomorrow night we'll do the night before Christmas and all through the house, where not a creature stirs, not even a mouse.